กผู้มีเกียรติทุกท่านนะคะอีก5นาทีค่ะเราจะเข้าสู่ช่วงของการเสวนานะคะโดยผู้เชี่ยวชาญค่ะในเรื่องของการเชื่อมโยงในยุคเทคโนโลยีนะคะอีก5นาทีข้างหน้านี้เราจะเข้าสู่ช่วงของการเสวนานะคะสำหรับท่านที่สนใจนะคะที่จะรับฟังหัวข้อเสวนาสามารถที่จะมานั่งที่บริเวณด้านหน้าเวทีได้เลยนะคะ Ladies and gentlemen, dear distinguished guests, in 5 minutes, we will begin for our next session. So I would like to call upon all the delegates and the participants who would like to join for this fantastic session. Would you please have a seat? Thank you very much.สวัสดีค่ะต้อนรับแขกผู้มีเกียรติทุกท่านอย่างเป็นทางการอีกครั้งหนึ่งนะคะและต้องขอต้อนรับนะคะกลับเข้าสู่งานสัมมนา CLMVT Forum 2018 ค่ะ Taking Off Through Technology ภูมิภาค CLMVT ทะยานสู่อนาคตค่ะสำหรับในวันนี้นะคะเราก็จะได้มารับฟังหัวข้อที่มีความน่าสนใจแล้วก็ถือว่าเป็นประโยชน์ต่อภูมิภาค CLMVT เป็นอย่างมากเลยทีเดียวนะคะซึ่งหัวข้อแรกที่เราจะมาพูดคุยกันในช่วงนี้นะคะจะเป็นหัวข้อที่มีชื่อว่าการเชื่อมโยงในยุคเทคโนโลยีค่ะ Ladies and gentlemen, honorable guests, I would like to welcome you back right here to our seminar of CLMVT Forum 2018 in the theme of taking off through technology. So right now, right here, we have a very interesting and also very informative session that we are going to get the experience and also the knowledge from our experts discussion on connectivities in the technological era. So first of all, I would like to take this opportunity to invite our expert moderator for this session. Could you please give a big round of applause to welcome Mr. Sun Kijor, partner and head of Southeast Asia AT Kearney. Please welcome. Up on the stage, together with our distinguished speakers. First, please welcome Ms. Mara Warwick, Country Director for Brunei, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Thailand, World Bank. ขอเสียงปรบมือดังๆนะคะเพื่อต้อนรับนะคะคุณมาร่าวอร์วิกด้วยค่ะ And next, please welcome Mr. Vishal Agarwal, partner of McKinsey and Company. Ladies and gentlemen, next, please welcome CEO SCB Abacus Company Limited, Dr. Sutapa Amornvivat. Please. And last but not least, for our last distinguished speakers going to join us on the stage, please welcome partner and COO RoboTerra Inc. Please welcome Ms. Melissa Lowe. And right now, I'm going to leave the floor for our moderator, please.
So, for this morning's late morning session, what we want to do is to get a discussion going on how we can leverage technology to improve connectivity within the CLMVT community. So maybe let us first define by what we mean by connectivity. So by connectivity, we are referring to three things. So one would be the physical connectivity, which is essentially the transportation and the ICT infrastructure. Secondly, it refers to the institutional connectivity, which are the rules, the policies, and agreements across nations that govern the physical connectivity and other things, as well as the people connectivity, which are the activities such as travel, tourism, education that facilitates interaction and exchange of ideas and knowledge. Now, over the last few decades, the world has become a lot more connected and smaller in many ways. A part of it has been due to globalization and trade. So among CLMVT countries, trade is between 50 to 200% of GDP. And this has largely been facilitated by trade pacts and the regionalization and expansion of multinationals. International travel has also more than doubled in the last 15 years in the CLMVT region, facilitated by open skies agreements and the advance of low-cost airlines. In all of these, technology has played an important supporting role. For example, through the invention of the humble transistor, it allowed us to have computers and the electronic systems that link up the world, and cellular phones and the networks that allow us to talk and share easily to one another without being physically present. In more recent years, technology has played an even more direct role in enhancing connectivity. In fact, we have some of the biggest and fastest growing companies in the world whose value is driven solely by connectivity, right? So connecting buyers to sellers, connecting passengers to drivers, connecting homeowners to tenants, and connecting individuals to their friends and family. However, there are challenges in terms of leveraging technology for the region. When we at Kearney looked at e-commerce a few years ago as a vehicle for SMEs to reach a regional audience, we identified barriers to its take-up and adoption, some of which are actually technology related. So this includes the cost of broadband and internet infrastructure, as well as the availability of online payment facilities. I think ASEAN, of which CLMVT is a major part of, this year is pushing e-commerce very hard as part of its digital agenda, and will be attempting to address some of these barriers to connectivity. Similarly, Industry 4.0 will have large implications for CLMVT countries, given that manufacturing contributes to 10 to 30% of the GDP in the countries here. How will the technologies underpinning Industry 4.0, which includes IoT, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, and robotics, actually affect CLMVT technology, connectivity? For the session this morning, the questions we'd like to get a discussion on will be around what is the current state of technological developments of the CLMVT region, what are the best practices or case studies from international experiences that CLMVT should learn from, what are the crucial potential and obstacles for technological developments of the region, and what needs to be done to unlock the potential of technology to promote connectivity. So to help us frame and perhaps provide some directional answers to these questions this morning, we have 4 distinguished guests, and I'm pleased to say that this is one of the few panels I'm in where we have more females than males on the panel, so I think that's great from a diversity and gender advancement point of view. So first, we'll have Ms. Mara Warwick from the World Bank. So Ms. Warwick is the country director for Brunei, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Thailand. Trained as an environmental engineer, she has expertise in flood management, urban development, urban environmental services, and disaster risk management. Before assuming her current role, Ms. Warwick has worked in many countries, including China, Korea, Mongolia, Turkey, and the Philippines, for the World Bank on policies and projects related to energy, environment, urban and rural development. Next, we have Mr. Vishal Agarwal. He's a partner at McKinsey and leads its operations practice in Southeast Asia. He supports clients on a range of issues, including operations transformation, large projects acceleration, and strategy. So Vishal has deep experience in Industry 4.0 and digital operations across sectors. Some of his most recent work include leading end-to-end supply chain optimization of a Southeast Asian player and helping an Asian plantation company to increase yield by more than 10% by precision forestry. Vishal also led the setup of Digital Capabilities Center in Singapore in collaboration with Advanced Remanufacturing and Technology Center. Next, we have Dr. Sutapa Amornvivat, who is the CEO of SCB Abacus, an advanced data analytics company under Siam Commercial Bank, where she previously served as chief economist and headed the Economic Intelligence Center and the Risk Analytics Division. Dr. Amornvivat has extensive experience in national policy making, economics, and analytics. Among other things, she's serving on the subcommittee on monetary banking, financial institutions, and capital markets under the National Legislative Assembly. She also founded TMB Analytics at TMB Bank during her secondment from ING Group and was an economist at the IMF at Washington, D.C. And last but not least, we have Ms. Melissa Loh, who is our resident entrepreneur. She's currently the COO and board member of RoboTerra, an AI robotics edtech company. So at RoboTerra, she leads product development for educational robotics kits that teach programming, hardware, and artificial intelligence to K3 and to 12 audiences. Ms. Loh has significant leadership experience in the startup sector and in Asia, including leading marketing for a consumer solar company in 60 countries, including far-flung places like Nairobi, and helping to grow Tom's Shoes in Korea, Philippines, and China. Melissa's deep expertise is really in business scale-up and product development and on human-centric research on remote societies. Right? So this should be a pretty interesting thing to follow up with her on. So, okay, with this round of introductions, let's get started. So let's maybe start with Mara first. Mara, do you want to start sharing some of your thoughts on our topics at hand?
Thank you very much for being here today. The sessions that you will have in the CLMVT Forum really capture, let me start again. The sessions that you will have in this CLMVT Forum in these 2 days really capture an impressive range of themes and important ideas and issues that we need to discuss in order to be able to explore how the digital economy can really become a gateway for the CLMVT for the world. And I think listening this morning also, I was very much struck that today's forum builds very closely on the theme of the previous forum towards a shared prosperity. Because ultimately, digital economy, the purpose of it is really that higher purpose, which is to promote a shared prosperity for all of the people of this region. I would like to just take in my opening remarks now just a few minutes to help frame the discussion, particularly through this development lens, looking at how the digital revolution can be seen in this bigger picture of development. And again, I think back to the opening speeches that we heard this morning, where there was a very strong emphasis on inclusiveness. We heard that word quite a few times, and also a strong emphasis on the importance of youth and thinking about youth's role in the digital economy. And these are, as you'll see from my remarks now, very important elements that link back to this issue of what this all means for development. The comments that I'm giving and some of the examples that I give are drawing largely from a World Development Report that was completed by the World Bank about 18 months ago called Digital Dividends, in which we attempted to really analyze the effect of digital infrastructure and digital activity on the economy and brought economic principles to this discussion. moves. So just a few ideas as background. As we know, digital technology has spread rapidly in much of the world. And in fact, mobile phones, as you would all know, have spread more rapidly than any other technology in history. Today, 7 out of 10 people amongst the poorest 20% of the world have a phone. And almost 45% of the world's population is already online. And we know that technology brings tremendous new possibilities. We heard that just now also from our moderator. It generates new businesses. It generates new opportunities. One of the classic examples, which I'm sure you're all aware, is Alibaba in China. 8 million online entrepreneurs are able to transact their business through the Alibaba platform. 62% of those are small-scale entrepreneurs. 1/3 of them are women. And quite interestingly also, that kind of platform has given an opportunity even to people with disabilities. About 1% of Alibaba entrepreneurs are persons with disabilities. So these are real gains, and these are new opportunities that we see in the world. And yet, we also know that a large population of the world, or a large part of the world's global population, has been left behind so far, and we really need to work harder to bring them into this economy. We're used to seeing a map of the world based on physical assets. This map that you can see on the screen now is a map based on digital assets, the number of people using the internet. And as you can see, this changes our picture of the world quite substantially. There are some countries where there are already widespread digital assets, but there are others which you will find somewhat harder to find on this map because their digital assets are really not commensurate with their economic position or where we would expect them to be. There's quite a lag. Okay, no, that's fine. So moreover, while we know that digital technologies are near universal in many of the high and also upper middle income countries, even in these countries, development gains remain somewhat elusive. The so-called digital dividends, the broader development gains from digital economy, the gains of growth, job creation, and the provision of services have lagged behind the development of technology itself. So we know that the digital technology has started to boost these things, but in aggregate, it has fallen short and been unevenly distributed. And that has resulted in what we call a digital divide. So globally, we know that of the 7.4 billion people in the world, about 6 billion are without broadband. 4 billion have no internet at all. 2 billion have no mobile phone. And 400 million have no access to digital signals at all. And within countries, not even on a global scale, but within regions and within countries, there is also a digital access gap. And this, in many places, is exacerbated by issues such as gender, income, age, and also geography. So there's a really unfinished agenda globally and an unfinished agenda regionally to make access affordable and universal. Oh, that went the wrong way. No. Sorry about that. Pressing the same button gets me the wrong direction. Yeah, next slide. I think that you'll need to control it from there. This is not controlling it. Can you keep going? Yeah. And the next one, please. Yes, that's it. Thank you. So why does this matter so much? Why is it important for us to close the digital divide? In the WDR, the World Development Report that I mentioned earlier, the World Bank proposed a pretty simple framework for understanding the benefits of the digital economy, linking it back, as I said, to the economic principles. Basically saying that there are 3 elements that can benefit everyone, everywhere, if we get these right. The first one is by expanding the information base. Digital economy, digital technologies helps to expand the information base and the access the population has to that. It helps people access private and public services. And in doing so, it promotes inclusion while expanding markets. So there's that very important aspect that I mentioned earlier, which is inclusion, making sure that growth and the economy is inclusive for all. The second is that in lowering information and coordination costs through automation, technology can make businesses, workers, and even governments more productive. And this ultimately helps us to boost efficiency. And thirdly, by creating information goods, new technologies, new types of businesses, technology can generate scale economies where both product and process become digital and marginal costs drop to 0. And this has spurred new business models and promotes innovation. I'm sure my fellow panelists will give us many examples for that, but even on the global context, we know that there are many interesting examples where, for example, the largest taxi company in the world owns no taxis, and the largest hospitality company in the world has no real estate. And these are the types of new innovations that can come from the digital technology. Next slide, please. So greater digital adoption per se, though, is not enough. And this is the point that I want to really emphasize, and that I think it would be worth for us to have some discussion as we go forward. And the reason that it is not enough just to address the technological aspects is because largely the biggest barriers today, including here in CLMVT, are in fact not technological barriers. To get most out of the digital revolution, it needs to be supported by good economic policies. It needs to be connected to the real economy. So in other words, we need to promote competition. We need to make sure that workers and people are skilled and able to operate in this economy. And also, most importantly, the accountability of institutions, particularly on the side of governments, is very important. In our World Development Report, we coined the phrase analog complements. So in addition to developing the digital, it's also important to develop the analog and continue to build those business practices and regulations that are important for the economy as a whole. And the reason for this is very clear, because of the corollary. In the absence of these, there are many significant risks associated with digital economy. The significant risk in the absence of competition and policies that promote competition. Digital economy is very susceptible, in fact more susceptible to concentrated markets than many other areas of the economy. Without proper skilled workers, we can potentially see in the future major disruptions to the labor markets, where many middle level and middle educated people may not be able to move up the chain, and in fact may move down the chain. And that can lead to risks. And then on transparency and accountability, it's also very important that the digital economy space is not subject to elite capture or heightened control. And also these are risks that are real. So in other words, the internet is not a shortcut to development, but with the right foundations, both analog and digital, we can see that it can really lead to an inclusive development for all. And the issues, as I said, of making sure that there is access for all, that the youth, particularly on the area of skills development, are very much focused on important elements. And last slide, please. And I'm just going to end with this slide, but I'm not going to tell you what it is quite yet. But I would like everybody to ponder it. Think about what this slide is actually showing. This photo is real, and it demonstrates a very interesting regulatory failure that I have mentioned as a concept in my remarks, and this is in a very specific part of the world. So I just ask you to ponder that and think about what you think it may mean, and later in the session I'll be happy to fill you in. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much, Mara. I think you've just given me a very easy follow-up question afterwards.
Just so pleased to be here with everyone today. It's actually really interesting for me to be able to join all of you and to join this really amazing panel of speakers. Primarily because I'm sure everyone here must have been very smart students, totally A students, and I myself was a very bad student. I was a C student, and I was able to go to Berkeley and Wharton, continue to be bad students at great schools, and so I guess that made a lot of sense for me to then go on into education, because I was a student who was not great at school but really loved learning, and I think that that's a very key topic to like bring up in terms of what our viewpoints on what connectivity, what technology looks like in the future, and particularly how do we prepare our children for the world that comes before us, as there's going to be very many rapid changes that are coming through. So I work at RoboTerra. We are an AI robotics edtech. We basically make really great education, robotics programming education kits everywhere from kids 8 years old all the way through university programs. And I'm gonna try my stuff at technology. Great. So RoboTerra's, our mission is to inspire creativity and ingenuity via robotic education to everyone worldwide, and we take this mission very seriously. For me personally, especially along the ideas of inspiration, creativity, and ingenuity, because I think that these are the things that will really make us human. And you'll see as I talk about like many of the global trends that are coming up within the education space, how this is really important for the children that we are raising for tomorrow. Let's see, let's get this thing to move. Here we go. So robots, you can see here, robots here that kids have built. We call him the welcome bot, waves his like hands around. And RoboTerra, we probably encompass three key areas that we cover. So as mentioned, we make kits for grades 3 all the way through a university. It's a robotics curriculum. And we are currently China's national robotics teacher standards, meaning that every single teacher in China who is teaching, whether from elementary school all the way through university, actually goes through RoboTerra's curriculum in order to get their certification as a robotics teacher. The third thing that we do, because we realize that this is a mission that we cannot accomplish alone, is that we work on education policy advisory and planning. And it's actually interesting because we had actually presented at Summer Davos last year, and a Thai minister came up to us and said, what do we do with our kids? How do we educate them for all the changes in technology that are coming up in the future? And actually, this is why I'm here today, because I think that this is going to be a really fabulous dialogue, not just for us as speakers, but also for all of you and us together, because this is something that we need to all work on together. And so I really welcome all of your ideas. And the great thing is that actually, especially with the oncoming of AI into our lives, into our technology, and in fact, reshaping the world that children are going to be heading into. This is a really hot topic right now, and actually no one has the answers figured out. And so the kinds of dialogues that we have at these types of forums actually go very far into the many discussions that we're having across the board. You know, I was at the AI Governance Council over in Dubai. We have the same discussions in Argentina. We are having these same discussions with many countries throughout the world, because I think policymakers are all trying to figure out what can we do to compete and what can we do to prepare our kids. So with I wanted to with a couple of Hello? Okay. No, I think I'm good. Hello? Great. I don't know what you guys had thought about when you were a kid and what you wanted to grow up to be, but the elementary school kid of today is dreaming about going to Mars. This is actually the realistic jobs of 2030, so it's actually coming up very, very soon. So I think that this is like, really fun, great ideas of what things that people can go into, whether it's like science or exploration. I'm kind of old. It would have been like thinking about Star Trek days and going into the place where no one had gone before. This is a competing view of the horror that people have arising in AI, is that robots are taking over the world, AI is taking over the world, that human brain capacity cannot, compete with the calculating capacities of all these new algorithms that are shaping our futures. We're not even really sure sometimes what they do. It's all very black box. And so I think that there's a lot of concern right now in terms of how do I, even as parents, how do I educate my child to be able to survive even in the upcoming stages. I work in robotics. It's never good when things start beeping. Here we go. So these are the competing visions of the future. We have one where robots are catering to all of our needs, and we basically, as humans, can lie back and do nothing and deteriorate. Or this even more horrendous like future where basically robots, AI take over the world, and we just become their batteries. And what do we do with that? Oh, okay, I get it. It's like, as a product designer. Okay, let's just go forward. Next. One more. Great. So you can tell that I'm a bad student because my PowerPoint's cut off like where the hockey stick goes. But basically, these are two curves. I think that if there's one thing that I can emphasize to everyone today, it's that the future is coming much faster, literally, than ever before. If you can imagine like life in the Middle Ages, what a farmer, the tools that he used, the lifestyle that he lived, was probably the same thing as his great-great-great-grandson 300-400 years later. Not too much difference between the two. However, as you can see, this is like the growth of GDP, and this is like the accelerating growth of technology, that life is literally changing much, much faster than ever before. And that means that the preparation that we have within our schools must prepare humans also for rapid change, which is actually not how education had been done previously. Next slide. So education of yesterday, it was actually really created for a manufacturing economy. And actually really interesting to be able to chat with Vishal today because his expertise is within the manufacturing sector. And I think that he would probably, and I don't want to put words into your mouth, but I think he would probably even argue that the education that was formulated for this old school factory doesn't even match up with the manufacturing needs of today. And one of the things is because education that had been created for the factory organization had been really centered around very siloed subjects. You had reading, writing, arithmetic. They call it the 3 R's, spelled very incorrectly, probably spelled by someone like me. And math, science, art, language, all of these are all separate courses. So if you guys remember the time when you went to high school, you went from one class period to another class period to another class period, but your math class was not integrated with your science class. Your science class had nothing to do with the art class, and I guess everyone loves recess. But I think that this is fundamentally a system of education that has been prepared for an older world that was not meant for change. It was for a very siloed, they set up education system just like the way that they set up the factory system. There's a lot of emphasis on things like handwriting, and if you can imagine all of us on our phones today, how much like handwriting has like usage in the real world. Next slide. The education of tomorrow is going to be quite different, and it has much to do with our ability to be able to increase the brain plasticity of children, because they may be in their lifetime encountering 2, 3, 4, 5 different types of economies, whereas before it would be hundreds of years before an economic standard would change. So we believe that the education of tomorrow is more human. So the great thing is that, as technology progresses, as AI comes and takes over many of the decision making, many of the jobs that used to happen, actually we get to become more human. And so our kids may be, unlike ourselves and even our previous generations of our great-great-grandparents, may actually be able to do the things that they ever wanted to do, may be able to actually achieve the dreams that they wanted to do, regardless of economic status, regardless of where they grew up in the world, regardless of the disparity between different classes. So the education of tomorrow needs to be focused on becoming more human, more social. It's definitely going to be much more international, and these are subjects that we'll get into later on. There's going to be much more technology connection and less information, more problem solving, because before, where you had to learn a lot of information from books and you had to memorize and get tested on it, today you can just go onto Wikipedia, you can go onto Google, and information is just at your fingertips. And so the emphasis is no longer on information memorization, but much more on problem solving. It's going to really challenge us to truly become human by becoming more creative, really challenging our curiosity, because these are the things that are going to be drivers. It's something that a robot cannot do. It's something that AI cannot do, which is ask the right questions. And there's going to be much more empathy between humans. So I really take the much more positive view of how the world will going to be, because I think that we as humans get to become more human, more connected with each other, with a lot more care. Next slide. So I wanted to go through the next 2, 3 slides, just kind of giving you the viewpoint that we have at RoboTerra. Remember my background as a C student who loved to learn and wanted to be able to take that curiosity and creativity to be able to do well with it while not be constrained by just what a school program per se told me what I could or could not do. So education principles of the next generation, we do believe that AI literacy should be a standard school subject, and it's because we should not ever get disconnected from the underlying technology that powers our world. However, what I want to caveat is that this does not mean that we want every single person to become a data scientist. Not everyone is going to be an AI expert. However, the technology that is going to be driving forces will be a force that can be harnessed, and so being able to teach them many skill sets for children to be able to harness the technology rather than only learning about the underlying technology is what we're trying to emphasize here. So in that sense, we believe that there should be a basic understanding of how AI, programming devices, and how machines work. And especially important is learning how to learn. Remember, we're encountering a fast-growing future, meaning that our paradigm of the world shifts maybe even on decades, within even a few years, where it used to take a couple hundred years. And so that means that people need to reskill, relabor, and to relearn or newly learn new skill sets at a very rapid pace and in multiple levels. So instead of teaching problems of which there is only one solution, we think that it's much more about teaching problem solving as a series of methodologies and tool sets, like a pantheon of tools that you can be choosing from for whatever interesting problem that you as a child are looking to solve today. And as a result, we also think that our collaboration skills are very key, that it's not going to be just one kid in front of a computer, but it's going to be groups of children, groups of humans together trying to figure out how to be able to change whatever it is that they're looking to change and develop in the world. And we also believe that early cross-cultural experience is going to happen. And I actually just moved back to the States recently from Kenya, had been heavily involved from everywhere in deep Africa, also deep within India and other parts of Southeast Asia. And it's amazing to me actually how children of all sorts of economic backgrounds, all sorts of diverse backgrounds are connecting with each other through online online sites. They're learning from each other from different courses throughout the world. And so however you and I had actually learned through school is quite different from what this next generation is going to look like. Next. So I think that we really have to emphasize not only AI literacy for every human child, but really developing a human-centric education policy. And I have a kind of a three-pronged approach, and this is much more from, I guess, like from practitioner side insights that we've been gathering. The three prongs are really technology system literacy, human system literacy, and global system literacy. And what I mean by technology system literacy is what we talked about before, just learning the basic underlying technology that powers the world so that we're not too disconnected. It's basic coding, hopefully coding very, very different, fun through RoboTerra's product, unlike how I had learned it in college. Machines, enhanceability on single dimensions, and also learning how machines learn, because I think that this is where the problem-solving criteria of future problems arises. Human system literacy is also something, sadly, that we haven't concentrated as much on, but I actually find that, within Thailand, within many of the CLMVT countries, actually really have emphasis on, which is the compassionate skills, the empathy skills. But I think that there's also even more that we can be doing with it. So for human system literacy, learning about the human brain, there's actually cases in Finland, where children as young as 8 or 9 years old learn about the different parts of their brain, what controls their emotions, what controls their hunger, and they're actually able to process through their emotions, learn not to get into a fight at school, or learn to talk through a problem in a very new way that's scientifically, neurologically based. So human brain, physical and psychology of how even learning works. You and I learn in different ways. Some of my friends learn in very analytical ways. Other friends learn in very creative ways. And some of us learn in very physical ways. At meetings, I'm always playing with different toys because I need to be able to touch something while I'm listening to the conference call. Understanding healthy individual and group dynamics, and these are all things that come out through RoboTerra's programming and how we do our hackathons and how we do our collaborative learning. And most of all, empathy, human-to-human interactions and collaborations, really understanding that's not just about myself and my world, but what's going on with this person in front of me, this other kid in front of me. And I think that, all of us who have been through the workforce realize much later on how important these kinds of interactive personal skills are. Finally, a global system of literacy, which is a larger understanding from a policy standpoint, from a production standpoint, about enhancing creativity and curiosity, because these are the things that will really drive the economy later on as technology takes over many of the current types of jobs that we have. Emphasis on being cross-cultural, and this means partnerships. This is why I love CLMVT, because it's so much of the unitedness, the connectedness between countries, between different cultures, and how we learn and how we are able to work together. Being international and also bringing down the cost of education and increasing access. I think I have one or two more. One more, please. So this is just a quick introduction into my world. LetsRobot.tv is actually a sister company of ours. That's one of the robots that runs around in my office every day. So I live in California. I go to work in flip-flops. Every morning as I have meetings, this robot comes. I should explain this a little bit. The robot is actually connected to an online platform. Any of you guys can go onto it on your phones right now and be able to connect into it. And the robot can be controlled by the public. So actually most of our people who are on the robots are children, and they have an online chat box, and they can actually control the robot. So in the morning when I'm having my meetings, I have my flip-flops on the ground, and the robot comes and steals my flip-flops, and then it goes and hides my shoes. And after my meeting, I have to have a whole conversation with the robot. And I'm like, robot, where are my shoes? And the robot says, no shoes for human. And I have to negotiate with the robot, give me my shoes, what do you want from me? And the robot tells me, I will only give you shoes if you give me pizza. Feed me pizza. And so And the back end of this, it's actually like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 kids who are collaborating how to like control the robot. They have to decide within themselves like who's going to run the controls, who's going to do the talking, who's going to do the demanding and the negotiation. And these are kids from China, from Denmark, from Argentina, from Africa, from all over the world. They're able to collaborate together to control this little robot to steal my shoes every single morning, and so that I can have a debate with them. This is the kind of world that kids are being educated in today. So last slide. I think that our responsibility here is really great because, you know, in the past, people were very stuck in terms of where they could really go in their life. If you were born into a certain family or into a certain region, into a certain socioeconomic status, you're pretty much stuck. Like you had to live out a life probably similar to how your parents had lived. But the onslaught of such great technology, great connectivity coming in actually allows a child from anywhere in the world to be able to live out dreams that are not necessarily limited by all of this fragmentation, I would say, of like economic, socio, and environmental and location backgrounds, geographical backgrounds. So I hope that any kid in anywhere within our different countries, within our communities, or anywhere in the world, we hope that if they want to go to Mars, we're able to equip them and we're able to bring education to them. So I guess like my ask for everyone today is also to be able to dialogue with all of you so that we can make this happen. Thanks.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Melissa. So last but not least, we have Sutapa, and I guess I also like to take this opportunity to also transition to the discussion part of the panel. So besides sharing some of your thoughts, you could maybe, if you have violent objections to any of the points that the panelists before you were making, please start the discussion going, and hopefully we'll have a lively conversation. Right?
Safe to go on?
Yes, I think organizers are reassuring us that it's safe. Yeah.
I know. Well, first of all, thank you, the organizer, and everyone on the panel. It has been a privilege to share the views with all of you. I particularly like what Melissa has just presented and discussing with us. I think education is a very key to enhance the connectivity within the region. We certainly have a lot of obstacles to connect, through labor, goods and service, capital, even data, and partly because even though the technology solutions already available for those gaps, be it language barrier, be it infrastructure underinvestment, or information gap, for example, all of these has been available, all these technologies to solve these problems has been available. But education is the one that actually help people to adopt all this technology. So I'm really appreciate what you has brought to the discussion about this. But I want to shift the discussion a little bit to some of the areas where our panelists hasn't really touched upon, which are when we talk a lot about connectivity, we traditionally always mention free flow of goods, services, capital, and labor. And definitely Vishal has touched quite a bit on the free flow of data, right, as a part of major connectivity. But I would like to focus on the related issues that are less discussed, but will become much more important in the near future. And the first issue that is a major, is it working fine? Okay, that's a major obstacle is the private information protection. A large portion of CLMVT population are already online, as we have seen from many presentations, and also on mobile. It is extremely difficult to control the flow of data. So data sharing has its own benefit, obviously, but as we move towards more connectivity, we need to build a strong foundation for data protection. Because otherwise, is it better to use something else?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, is that better? So, so we need to build a strong foundation for data protection, because otherwise, as we may face exploitation, and we'll have to play catch-up games with large corporates, that currently very prevalent in the data arena, like Facebook Online, for example, which I do use every day. So we may not know what the right recipe for the region would be, whether we want to adopt a much more strict, like GDPR in the EU, or a more lax approach like the one in the US. But we should at least begin the debate on how to build a common ground for the issues such as data consent, data ownership, or the right to be forgotten. This has not been discussed in the national level, or even worse, the intra-regional level, because I think it's extremely important for all of us going forward. So international case studies that I've seen so far within the region and beyond. For example, Singapore just passed a data privacy law last year. I understand. It protects all personal data 10 years after the person's death. And South Korea has some of the strongest data privacy law. It was passed in 2011, 7 years ago, and it was strictly enforced. That's also important. So I already mentioned the GDPR, which came into effect earlier this year. We have yet to see the real impact that it has on the overall, the digital economy and what the transformation it has on the connectivity as a whole. But it certainly set a higher bar to how to obtain personal information, that we have ever seen before. At any time a company collects a personal data, they have to make it very clear, explicit, and informed consent from that person. And the user will have a way to actually revoke that consent if they later find out that they haven't given those consent by mistake, and they can request all the data a company had from them as a way to verify that consent also. So that's extremely strict, but at the very least, it provides a means to which the company can do the business with full consent and with clarity and understanding with the retail customers. Another issue that I want to touch upon on this route is also the issue of intellectual property rights protection. There's another type of information that is flowing across borders, and it's the idea for profit that we may or may not have the rights to claim. So the example is the digital platform like e-commerce or crowdsourcing are providing new ways to connect between demand and supply, consumers, producers, business, and investors. But these platforms also open up new opportunities for small business in the CLMV region to realize their full potentials without being constrained by physical connectivity or constrained by financial limitation. However, they can also thrive on a safe environment where their creativity and ideas are also well protected. Because this is also important, that if this platform that open the connectivity would be a transparent platform for the people to come in and share those ideas have to be well preserved and protected and belong to the person who actually the founder of those concepts. And this can, as you can say, it can be copied or stolen quite easily. So the intellectual property rights protection is extremely crucial for us to fully reap the benefit of all this connectivity. So just before I end this round on this side is the harmonized standard and coordinated effort in terms of law enforcement is extremely important for the region to fully connect, particularly in the digital age where the free flow of data as the new things that we really haven't really figured it out on any region, let alone the global stage. So to end it there.
All right. Thank you very much, Sutapa. I think you brought up some important points around data protection, privacy regulations, and I think it's kind of linked also to Vishal's points around data policies and data flows, in which we have a lot of rules around trade, but very few rules around data. So in the spirit of keeping the discussion going and trying to drill this down into something that some of the policymakers out there might be thinking about, and also in the spirit of being provocative. This topic actually came up in a conference I was in a few weeks back, and one of the major VC investor said, okay, I mean, the CLMV, especially the CLMV, many of the CLMV countries don't have data-related rules, right? So what do? Do they look at EU, Singapore, Thailand? He basically said, look, if you want to leapfrog in terms of digital connectivity, don't follow the mature economies. Take a look at who is really in front out there. Estonia is supposed to be the most digitally connected and advanced when it comes to rules. Take their rules, translate into Laos, Cambodian, and make it your rules, and you're there, right? So what's your, I mean, we have 4 experts here, well, especially we have 3 which have a lot of experience in dealings with data, privacy rules, regulations, national policies. I mean, what's your reaction to something like this? I mean, it is a complex topic, but it's also something in which, but there are various ways that we can go about doing it, right? In order to enhance the connectivity within the CLMVT country, and data and digital connectivity is a major part of it, right? Any reactions?
Let me take a few ideas on that. I mean, I think that the important thing here in establishing these rules is to go back to the principle of what are you trying to establish the rules for. And certainly here in the CLMVT area, I think it is certainly true that the rules on data are underdeveloped. But the principle of what are you trying to achieve in establishing those rules? I think first and foremost, it would be promoting trust, and second of all, promoting the flow of data. And so from that perspective, looking at rules, for example, that promote the cybersecurity, consumer protection, data privacy, these are all very important, including the cross-data flows. But also very important to make sure that there is a coordination amongst the countries so that you don't end up with a localization of data that then impedes the overall objective. So thinking about data flows in such a way that you can provide that trust, but without having a series of rules from country to country which are overlapping and ultimately will diminish the economic impact of the digital space. And just to link to that, not quite the question, but just to emphasize one other point about data that we think is very important. And that is that another very underdeveloped area of the digital economy is the notion of taxation of the digital economy. So the digital economy is benefiting very much from the public goods that that countries and that the economy as a whole provide to it. So the question is how can the digital space give back to that? Around the world, this is still a very undeveloped area. There are, we know in ASEAN region here, there is a growing interest among the countries and some significant work now being done in Malaysia, here in Thailand, to really explore how to do this. But this is something that will very much depend on data. It will very much depend on countries being able to understand the flow of data and to then come up with, hopefully, some coordinated approaches that will allow all of the economies to benefit.
So a few additional thoughts. I totally agree with Dr. Mara. Setting rules, policies on data exchange, cybersecurity, no point can't be done individually. It will only create silos and blocks of data within each pockets of countries, which will make interportability more difficult, which will add more costs for the companies. So it has to be done as a block. And as CLMVT, as broader ASEAN, it is important to have single policies, single frameworks around data. And ideally then, as globally we need to think about it, but it's hard to do that here. As ASEAN or CLMVT, it's important to have single framework around data. So that's one. The second thought that was going on in my mind is then individually as countries or as a bloc, it's important to think about many of the aspects, right? It is not just about the data exchange. A lot of the data honestly sits today on the clouds. And as more and more cloud and cloud computing becomes important, a lot of the data that the farmer would capture here in Myanmar or Thailand might be sitting on a server somewhere in Europe. And that's where just having single framework only applicable for one country doesn't work here, because that data will be subject to the GDPR regulations. Similarly, if I'm an online retailer sitting here in Thailand, but I'm selling to a customer in Europe, again, it adds costs because I need to comply with the GDPR regulations there for these particular customers that reside in EU. So both as a country and as a policymaker, it's important that each individual country is putting in place these frameworks that is reducing costs for the business. And then as business, of course, you need to have basic data protection in place as more and more economy moves towards digital.
All right, thanks a lot. Well, let me switch a bit to what some of the things that Melissa brought up, which is, again, I'm trying to drill it down to what the policymakers sitting out there would want to take away. So certainly, very exciting opportunities to think differently about how we educate our young children. So now the reality is that, and you will know because you work in a lot of what I'll call frontier countries. In a lot of emerging countries, governments have a lot of problems to deal with, right? So we need to crystallize it into: is it a laptop? Is it a digital device on every child's hand, even if he is sitting in a farm 50 kilometers from any infrastructure? Is it an internet connectivity as a universal human right that the country needs to enforce, and therefore make every company, like the telcos or the internet service providers, be a party to that? Is it about saying, well, you're not going to be able to doing all of that is useless unless you can basically transform the teaching profession, right? So teachers are still stuck in the old ways of teaching. So even if you put a device in a child's hand, the teacher doesn't know what to do with it, right? And the child, okay, if they're enterprising, they'll go to robots TV and try to learn stuff on their own. But what does the teacher do? So I agree, education is the most important thing. I guess the question here is what in education should policymakers especially and maybe even the entrepreneurs out there be focusing on to make a material difference in the next decade? Right?
Hello? Great. A lot of great questions within that. I think that I'll address a couple top of mind that I think are important for this forum. So my background, even prior to RoboTerra, I had been working within communities, many villages, a lot of rural communities like throughout the world. And one of the things that I've discovered is that actually, regardless of even education or environment and surroundings, is that the human spirit is sophisticated. The human spirit is it's beautiful and it's deep, no matter where you go. I think that in maybe those of us who had grown up in more urban areas or from more advanced places, such as Bangkok, we might have a sense that, those who will grow up in the countryside might be country bumpkins or something of that sort. And it's completely not the case. That the human is, I would say, equally deep in their spirit, no matter what society that they grow up in. And what I find really interestingly is that within frontier markets and within frontier countries is that actually there's much more creativity and much more curiosity and diversity of thought in order to deal with the daily challenges, oftentimes due to lack of infrastructure or lack of like resources, humans are actually challenged much more to stretch their imagination in order to solve problems. So if anything, I actually think it's a huge advantage from anyone coming in from like CLMVT nations and even other, like, you know, I consider these much more emerging markets where there are others much more even frontier markets, that I would say that first world societies actually are at a disadvantage of. And I know that sounds kind of crazy. You know, I come in from like Silicon Valley where everyone thinks that they are at the tip of innovation, but actually they are, you know, your average Silicon Valley person has running water, has electricity, has, you know, functional roads, all of this stuff. Whereas, you know, I work with a startup in Uganda. These guys had to build a box that has like greater connectivity, that also has, creates a solar power that you can use to sell to your next door neighbor, and also give an allowance to your child, and even sell it back to other people on the grid, and it takes pictures. I mean, it just bypasses everything because of the things that are not currently there. So I think that the first thing I would challenge is, like, you know, the assumption that, you know, there are disadvantages, because I think there are actually many advantages to coming in from places where there's a little less infrastructure, a little less resources than there had been before. I think to other parts of your question, in terms of like what can we be doing to develop on education side, and also, you know, what does that look like from a child standpoint? I think it may not necessarily mean a digital device in every single child's hands. In fact, I think that, you know, there are many modes that we've seen throughout the world. In some of the villages in Africa, it's often a kiosk that, you know, the kids actually self-organize together and they self-learn around, like, you know, one particular computer or like a kiosk or something of that sort. So I think that, like, you know, and to be honest, even devices get outdated so quickly that it doesn't matter as much. But I do think connectivity is king. I don't think that connectivity is, like, say, the quote-unquote the future, but it is almost like the most basic infrastructure that is needed so that we can get everyone in the world connected. And so, you know, Facebook and a lot of like startups are starting to bring connectivity in some of the most like remote places on Earth. And I think that that's definitely a good thing, because it's only through connectivity that children have access to the information and resources. But I think that from wherever they are in the world, especially if they're meeting challenges, their creativity is already growing at an exponential rate, and it's just a matter of being able to tap the right resources into them.
Yeah, Sutapa or Mara, I mean, both of you have experience in policy, so from a policy point of view, what do you think?
Okay, I just want to add to what Melissa just mentioned. I think education is not just focusing on the classroom. And also, we are talking about AI is taking over lots of jobs, particularly in this region and much more the less developed area in the world. I also feel that a lot of investment from the policy view and also from the private sector point of view should be focusing on retooling these people. And what to retool? We have to prepare going forward that a lot of the jobs that we consider human jobs are going to be replaced easily by AI. Medical services, legal services, or the natural language processing AI are going to replace human-like interaction. We're starting to see a lot of devices that help people with depression. It's much more comforting to actually talk to a machine and reveal the most darkest secret and get out of depression than to a person. So it's the trust issue that's actually, you can interpret both ways, whether you're trusting the machines or you're actually trusting another human being who may have other connection back, you know, to you eventually. So so I think all of these jobs are at threat. They would not take over the way we see in the movies. You know, the general general artificial general intelligence, where the machine can become another human that's faster, smarter, that can think of anything. It's really far-fetched. We're talking to a lot of AI experts, and they really think that today, AI today is very, very good at doing something really well. It's quite specific to a task. That's going to change very quickly, but it's not going to be overnight. So this kind of education needs to be trained to retool the people that has been replaced, but it needs to be think even beyond the classroom. The people, connectivity is extremely important for this region. For example, farmer in Cambodia can learn about how to better take care of their crops from the internet, or learning about the world price fluctuation of his crops easily with, the basic infrastructure that can be provided by the government and the policy that allows the people to connect with transparent data transfer, with clear protection against abuse and security.
Couple of thoughts to that. I think from our perspective, when we think about the policymakers, what can policymakers today really focus on, and what shifts would be needed? The real question is, what skill mix are we trying to develop in the children of today to be able to work in the economy of tomorrow? And in this subject, I think we would emphasize two things. The previous, my colleagues here on the panel have emphasized one area of this primarily, which is the digital skills area, to make sure that children have basic access and digital skills. But what we are working on in the World Bank more and more is thinking about more fundamental skills for people. If we train somebody today to do a job today, that job is likely not going to exist when they are an adult. So they need to be able to ultimately retrain themselves as their life goes on. And that is the big difference between our lives, my generation, and my children's generation, that they will need to be able to adapt as they go along. And much of the research that's being done on this today is really pointing to the fact that it is more important to teach children and to help children to learn to have a lifelong love of learning, and also skills that will allow them to do that. And one of the areas of this that is coming to the forefront now in many countries is what we call socio-emotional skill development. And these are the elements. Socio-emotional skills are things like grit and determination, things that actually help you as an individual to push yourself forward and to adapt and cope with change. And we see that these are becoming more and more important for children. Some recent work that we did in the Philippines, actually, although not in CLMVT, but I cite it anyway, shows that the lack of education in these skills is already having an impact on employability of people, that the labor market today needs a higher level of these skills, let alone the labor market of tomorrow. So it's really a question of focusing much more on these aspects, helping children to learn these skills. And the final thought on that, I think personally, my own, something that was very interesting to me in this work that we did in the Philippines, is that these skills are developed very early in life. These are mostly skills that are developed in young children, elementary age into middle school. Beyond that, you can reinforce and you can help people to continue to build on them. But the time to be teaching these is when children are very small. It's not a vocational education subject on itself. It is an elementary school subject. And I think there's some very interesting work being done around the world, including in this region, CLMVT, about this particular aspect of education.
Thank you very much, Nora.
A lot of focus is going on child education, but I think it's very important to keep in mind adult education as well, because the new technologies will make a lot of people jobless unless adult education is dealt with. I mean, historically, the easiest way was, India, there was a BPO boom which relied on just basic language skills of people, right? It moved when the labor costs became more expensive, it moved further east, it went to Philippines, and that has been the logic of most of the developing economies growing, which is when the labor market in developed markets become expensive, it comes to developing economies as cheap labor. That's no longer the case, right? The image recognition, the voice recognition, the face recognition softwares are so advanced now that they don't have to outsource any of these, right? The labor market and the adults of these countries will need to upskill themselves to be able to capture this growth of digital wave.
Yeah, thank you, Vishal. I'm conscious of time because we have a hard stop at 12:30, but I also want to give the opportunity for anyone, for folks from the floor who have burning questions to ask a couple of questions. So I think there are people with microphones. So if you have a question, please raise your hand, and someone will run over to you with a microphone. So any questions from the floor for the panelists here? I see a hand there from that lady. Could we give her a microphone? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Phương. I'm from Vietnam. My question is relating to digital money, e-money. I heard that the partner from McKinsey, you mentioned about the single policy of the country within the regions, how to manage technology or how to connect technology to the real world. And recently, many issues, concerns of digital money. And is this any kind of, a hot topic of which policymakers within the regions sit together to talk about a kind of single policy for e-money to support digital technology to connect with the trading and business? Thank you.
So maybe either Vishal or Sutapa can respond to that, since I think Sutapa, you have worked in in that sector as well, right? So.
In terms of coordinated effort between governments about the e-money, I think there probably a lack of coordinated effort within a government about e-money. Not talking about Thai government in particular or anyone, but I actually feel that this is a particularly new area. It challenged a lot of the theoretical monetary theorists on what it means by money, store of value, exchange of the medium of exchange, and basically because you can't really control the supply, and the movement is very, very fast. It raised another important questions about the money laundering, and I think that's the reason for the major concern or the friction that we see in this market. I think people see the benefit to the tokenization. Cryptocurrency, e-money, is a small subset of that tokenization development. And I would say that in terms of the policy, I would resort back to Dr. Mara said earlier, is depending on what we're trying to control, what objective is for that particular government and the regional governments to actually define that law. I think right now there are two concerns that has put some sort of not resistant, but I would say it has people hesitant about approving or agreeing with the cryptocurrency or e-money. One is stability, because the money is moving very, very fast. And as we had suffered, almost all regions in the world has suffered when we start an open economy, and we have seen that in 1997 and recently in the 2008 crisis. When the money is moving very fast, it adds to instability. And we have seen the crisis, and the smallest unit in the economy are the one that suffered the most. And so stability is number one that they're concerned about, because nobody actually understands how to control that movement. Secondly is in terms of crime, money laundering. Because right now, you can, if you use blockchain, you can follow that money anywhere, but you don't know who holds them. I think that's the concern. So, not really answering your questions, but I think it's more fundamental as to what are we coordinating for.
Just a couple of different cuts at the question. If I understand correctly, you were also asking what coordination is needed to drive e-money because of the potential, if I understand it correctly. And you were right. It is not just across countries. I think the first step as policymakers, it's important to have coordination within the country. In olden days, it was very clear. The Ministry of Finance manages banks and money flows, it's clear. Right now, with the e-money, the money on phone and the e-wallets and the m-wallets, you need to have coordination between the central banks, the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Information, the Ministry of Telecoms, and there are probably 3 or 4 other ministries, and the Ministry of Security, right? We're talking about money laundering and cyber security. And that coordination is really important. Right, and the countries that have done best to foster the growth of this particular aspect is getting all of these ministries together, either into coordination or a task force or whatever it is. So that's, I think, very important. Number one. Number two, then as a block of nations, it is important to then have these task forces talk to each other, or a common task force. Now, if I think about the digital trade, the online commerce, it could really take off even more than what it is today if you had a single currency or a wallet across the block, right? I mean, globally, if I think of one wallet that is cross-country, etc., the biggest one probably comes to mind is PayPal. What is the equivalent of PayPal in this part of the world, which I can trade and use across different countries? It's very hard to have. It's very hard for one name to pop up, which is as popular, right? But that is an opportunity. We're talking about hundreds of millions of people spending billions and billions of money on e-commerce and trade across the countries, and just unlocking this e-money potential by bringing all of these policymakers and countries together offers us very significant value for CLMVT.
Thank you. We have time for just one more quick question and answer. Is there? Okay, that gentleman over there. Could we have a mic? Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, hi. My name is Peter Fishbach. My company is ISM Technology Recruitment. We recruit and place IT staff here in Thailand. You've mentioned about the problem with skills shortage, particularly, I guess, to Ms. Mara from the World Bank, and the necessity for there being collaboration in free flow of skills. Yet, nearly every country, not only within CLMVT, but globally, puts up significant barriers to the free flow of skills. The difficulty of getting a work permit or getting a visa. This is a very competitive world for skills everywhere. And without countries actually making it easy and competing for those skills by making it easy for people with those in-demand technical skills to come and work, nothing will ever move forward at the pace that you've described. The World Bank's ease of doing business rankings, to the best of my knowledge, do not even include this issue of free flow of skills as being an ease of doing business. What can we do, and what can you do, not you, anyone on the panel, but particularly World Bank for one, what can we do to convince policymakers not to be so restrictive and not to limit the free flow of skills which are in high demand? Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to request Mara to give a not more than 2-minute response to this because we need to close this forum.
I think that you've framed the issue quite correctly, and in many respects, this is not just an economic issue, or at least it's not perceived by governments as being purely an economic issue. It is, as much as anything, a political issue. So in that respect, I think this is something for, not just for policy advisors, but for the public as a whole and for business as a whole, to really continue to emphasize to governments the importance of this. Obviously, there are many governments now who are looking at this issue, the issue of migration or labor migration. What can they do to help promote it, either in terms of accepting or sending people, and there's, I think, in this particular area, also in ASEAN in particular, there's a lot of interest in that. ASEAN itself is focusing on this issue of labor mobility and looking at regional type programs. So I think, there's no easy answer to it, because, as I said, it's not just economic, it is political at the same time, and so it's really a question of showing the importance of it and keeping, governments moving towards that. If I can just also at the end, I promised to explain what that photograph was, and I would like to do that because it ultimately illustrates a point that I would like to make. Those people that were standing on a beach were Somali migrants in Djibouti. And they were standing there trying to get a signal from the much cheaper telecom network in Somalia while they were standing in Djibouti. And the point of this to policymakers, Somalia is a much poorer nation than Djibouti. It is a nation where that has many challenges, but it has a very well-regulated, very competitive communications environment, unlike the highly controlled and regulated monopoly in Djibouti. The impact of that regulatory difference, it has nothing to do with level of development, level of wealth. It has everything to do with good policy making. And I think that links back to your point now on labor mobility. That also doesn't have anything to do necessarily with wealth. It has everything to do with good policy making and making sure that, that the economic outcomes that are trying to be achieved are being supported through that policy making.
Thank you, Mara. So I guess it's time for us to close the conference. But what I'd like to do is to just take a short minute to maybe summarize some of the things that was discussed. I think all of you have seen all the great presentations that's been given by the panelists. I think in the discussions it's quite clear that a few things came out. One would be that data is a new oil, and currently we are underprepared in terms of how we are regulating it, treating it cross-border internally within the country. So I think there's it's very important that policymakers spend a lot of time thinking of, be prepared to spend as much time thinking about data as you are thinking about trade, right? So I think that's one important implication. Two is like what Mara said, I think basic connectivity, and it's not just about connectivity, basic, cheap, affordable connectivity, and it's not just about phone calls nowadays, it's about data speed. It's going to be very important. I don't know if we can make it a human rights or a fundamental issue, but it does make the difference between, say, a child getting educated correctly in the future versus not. Right? So I think you have to put it in that level of importance. And of course, last but not least, I think learning, the old ways of learning is out the door. You need to learn. You need to employ and have plans and policies in place to encourage lifelong learning. And I think through some of the examples that the panelists have given, there are new innovative ways, low-cost ways of propagating learning and harnessing, I guess, the natural childlike curiosity of most of the learners out there. So with that, I thank the panelists again for their very thoughtful presentations and responses. And I would like to close this morning's session. Thank you very much for your audience. Thank you.
Thank you very much for all the distinguished speakers for sharing your knowledge and experiences. So ladies and gentlemen, as our appreciation, we would like to hand the token of appreciation to all our distinguished speakers. Right now, I would like to take this opportunity to invite the Director General, Trade Policy and Strategy Office, Ministry of Commerce, Thailand. Could you please give a big round of applause to Ms. Pim Chanok Wonkhorn. Please welcome. There was a brilliant and amazing session that we have received from our distinguished speakers. And of course, we still have many interesting sessions that are going to presented by our distinguished speakers from Thailand and also from overseas. So right here, please, once again, that I would like to inform you that you can just scan the QR code to check all the schedules right at the registration desk. And also, right here after this session, we are going to have a wonderful luncheon session, which is you are all going to be invited to another wonderful session. So the next is time for luncheon. I inform to our honorable guests, we have prepared you the lunch right in front of the area of the seminar room that you can exit this room at the main entrance, and the luncheon will be on your right hand side for the international buffet. Also, thank you very much, everybody. And also for the next session that you could not miss, we have arranged for a special session called Luncheon Talk, going to present by Minister attached to the Prime Minister's office, Dr. Gopsak Putragoon. He's going to talk about the creativity shared prosperity in CLMVT. It's very interesting and very informative session that you all can join. So at the place that we are going to hold this special session, you are all invited to the luncheon talk that you can exit this seminar room to the main entrance. At the luncheon talk will be on your left hand side while you have the wonderful lunch, and then you are going to receive a very good message and the experience from Dr. Gopsak Putragoon as well. So right here, right now, thank you very much, and then we will come back right here for our afternoon session, which is going to start at 2 p.m. We are going to have CLMVT, Creating Shared Prosperity in CLMVT. Once again, thank you very much and see you again after lunch. สวัสดีค่ะ